Hello everyone, this is JKessler presenting the Histoire de Soldat by Igor Stravinsky. The story of a soldier was from Afanasiev's collection of Russian folklore, a tale called The Soldier and the Devil. Stravinsky collected this piece shortly before the breakout of World War I, where he found himself in Switzerland meeting his collaborator Charles Ramuz. The Soldiers March is the initial movement of this piece. We find a steady march that is played by the bass and not the drums. The march has, within that bass, has a 1/5 feeling, mostly due to the fourths that Stravinsky places in that bass line and uses throughout the movements. And we also have the juxtaposition of moving meters and phrases. That bass line stays steady despite the meter changes. However, the phrasing follows the meter changes. Here we see the initial theme in the recordings presented by the trumpet and the trombone immediately, and is found with rhythmic variations throughout the piece. The second example you see is that theme occurring again at the final end of the piece, kind of putting a cap on the movement. There are 3 places in this part where we see full chords rather than clusters of sound. So we see at the beginning, at the end of that opening phrase, we have the F sharp diminished 7th in third inversion, dropping down a whole step, essentially to the ear, to an E minor in second inversion in the measures 3 and 4. Then we move into the middle of the piece with measures 20 and 21, where we have an arpeggiated A major, an arpeggiated B major, and an arpeggiated A major, also ties in with the style of the form. And then we see the last 2 chords at the end as a reflection of the initial theme. Again, this time it's a B minor 7 instead of a diminished, in third inversion, like the beginning, and an A minor 7 in second inversion, again like the beginning. However, the internal workings of the chords do change a little bit. I mentioned that those middle chords also reflected the form of the piece. We have our A section with our steady bass line. The pitch in the beginning and the end does not change. That bass line stays steady throughout the whole thing, and that D in the bass remains constant throughout. Here we see that there's a walking bass line in the B section, so our overall form is ABA. Ragtime is a clip from a movement of this piece that I picked because it has a good representation of the whole work. Stravinsky had gone to Madrid in 1916, where he was introduced to street bands. He had also began collecting ragtime sheet music. Even though he'd not listened to jazz, it was a huge influence on this whole work. One of the ways it was influenced was in the instrumentation. So we see treble bass representatives and all the family. With a couple of changes, we see the saxophone is swapped out for the bassoon because Stravinsky didn't like the saxophone, and we see the violin added in. And the violin and percussion played a huge role in this work because the violin is the soldier's soul, actually sold to the devil, and the percussion represents the devil. The 3 dances are supposed to be a portrait of the dance rather than the actual dance, and we will see that here in Ragtime. The opening 4 bars are your typical 4-bar introduction in a ragtime piece. However, the meter is different, and the drunken bass line is also a little bit different. It's kind of has this lopsided feeling throughout the whole piece. Even if the bass line is steady, there's always something to keep it a little off balance. And we see a 3/8 note syncopation motif that we will see again. Measures 10 through 12. Here we see an interruption of the steady beat by meter changes. We also see a new rhythmic motif where we have our dotted 16th, 32nd. The second section actually begins at the pickups to measure 16 and is a sequence of runs. One thing that's really interesting to the ear is even though these runs here on that A are identical, these changing runs underneath in this second part change how those sound and sequence them as well. Following the B section, we have a bridge, and you could take this clip right here and you could say it was 26 to 31, or you could say it was 64 through 69 because these measures are exact repetitions of each other. In between those 2 bridges, we do have our development with 5/8, 3/8, 7/16 and other meters that do kind of flip-flop all over the place here. Again, this is a place where we have a bass line played by the bass, as well as being in that position of being fourths throughout the whole piece. Ragtime overall follows a lot of that sonata form that we've been looking at. Most of the meter changes do occur in the development and is a huge blend of styles and forms throughout this piece. Stravinsky's style does include a lot of the fourths throughout this whole work. There's rhythmic and meter changes that he began usage of in Fireworks just a few years earlier. Things are written one way and sound another because of that rhythmic and meter change, but there's always a push forward. Stravinsky highly valued aesthetics, whether it was a purpose for writing or staging or anything else that was included in his writing. He also has his melodic motion in whole tones. Any tone sets that I found were occurring in whole tone runs, whole tone movement like we saw in those chord positions earlier, and clusters of semitones. Some clusters of semitones were layered on top of each other, but nothing really stood out as far as tone sets. We also see hints of the neoclassical Stravinsky throughout this piece, as he's still hanging on to remnants of his Russian heritage and his influence from Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov and the Russian Five. But you can hear the separation of the composer from his homeland as this whole piece is set to be a piece that can be fit anywhere, not just Russia or Switzerland. Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about Stravinsky. I have attached copies of this PowerPoint as well as a couple of and a YouTube attachment for these works. I look forward to seeing yours.